Have you ever wondered what happens when a forgotten name is pronounced in the wrong place, at the right time? In cell 18 of the Monroe Penitentiary, there were no cameras or microphones, just concrete, steel, and silence. But that morning, the silence gave way. An inmate arrested for an apparently unrelated crime whispered something that froze the air. "She's still in one piece." The phrase didn't seem threatening, but whoever was in the room understood. Because the name he said, Danielle Moore, belonged to a young woman who had been missing for more than 2 decades. A cold case. No clues. No body. The strangest thing? He was never investigated during that period. It was never on the list. He never even lived in the same state. So how could someone who didn't officially know her know details that even the police didn't disclose? How did he describe the cut on the palm of his left hand that only someone who saw the body up close could know? This is not just one real story. It's a confession from inside the prison. What you're about to discover now may surprise you. Watch this video until the end, and you will get goosebumps. Because everything that was revealed in that cell was just the beginning. And what came next? No one was prepared to hear it. His name is Elliot Graves, but the official records tell us almost nothing. No priors, no psychiatric history, no complaints. Nothing that caught anyone's attention, until the moment he opened his mouth in that cell. But if you dig into his past, you'll find a pattern that no one else wanted to see. Night shift worker at the Monroe County morgue for 17 years. Silent, methodical, invisible. He always arrived 22 minutes early. He left without leaving a trace. He didn't interact with anyone other than the bodies. I worked the shift when no one wants to be awake, when the living sleep and the dead have not yet grown cold. Living in an isolated trailer on the edge of the county, Elliot didn't use a cell phone. He did not have social media accounts. I paid everything in cash. He was studying old medical journals, human taxidermy manuals, and neurological body restraint experiments. His interest was not death, it was immobility. The moment between still alive and no longer. In his free time, he frequented libraries looking for missing person reports, but he never borrowed. I just watched. He memorized dates, scars, names like Danielle Moore, names that disappeared, but were never forgotten. He didn't look for victims, he chose cases, and each case he was part of a sequence, from an experiment, from a file. Elliot didn't speak often, but when he spoke, it was as if he were continuing a conversation that had begun years ago. Danielle Moore disappeared on March 14, 2004. But to Elliot, she stopped being just a person long before that. The first time he saw her was in a hospital bulletin board. She was smiling, holding a clipboard, with a sentence scrawled in the corner of the page. Care begins in silence. The photo was not public. Only someone with access to the morgue files would see that. And he saw it. Danielle was a nursing student and an intern at a nursing home. She was known for her calm demeanor. She spoke slowly, took a deep breath before answering, and organized her days with precision. She took the same bus. She stopped at the same grocery store. She always wore the same purple scarf tied around her wrist. She was predictable. Elliot spent 11 nights watching her from afar. There was no desire, there was no hate, there was calculation. She represented the ideal standard, stable routine, absence of intense bonds, a trace of introspection. People like that don't disappear quickly. They evaporate. What defined her choice was a note in Danielle's notebook found years later. The weather is less scary when you're busy. For Elliot, that was more than a sentence. It was a code, an open door. Danielle believed that routine was protection, and he believed that routine was a loophole. The choice was made the moment she stopped at the traffic light, looked at her watch, and took a deep breath before crossing. In Elliot's head, at that moment, the experiment began. She just didn't know yet, but he was already timing it. The place where Danielle was to be taken did not appear out of nowhere. Elliot built it over 7 years, piece by piece, with the precision of someone who did not want to improvise anything. It was an abandoned military. bunker, buried under a rural property purchased at auction in the name of a shell company. The entrance? Camouflaged by rubble and tall vegetation, no one had been there since 1993. Downstairs the air was dry. The walls were lined with stainless steel panels. In the center of the main room, an original surgical table from the 1960s, restored and sanitized with industrial hospital supplies. Above it, a single cold bulb hung from a thick copper wire. The light cast symmetrical shadows on the floor. It was as if the space had not been made for killing, but for observing. In the corners, cabinets catalogued by number. Each contained adapted tools, syringes with their own brands, neuromuscular response sensors, laminated notepads. Everything positioned within human logic. There was also a ventilation system modified to leave no smell, not even heat. The most disturbing detail: an old analog camera hooked up to a mechanical timer that Elliot had altered to set resistance, not time. The PI counter did not show minutes. He showed floors. On the opposite wall, a single inscription written with a scalpel. Case 0047, full immobility. Nothing in that place was improvised. Nothing there accepted chaos. Every detail was a cog in the experiment. Elliot wasn't creating a captivity. I was setting up a laboratory. Because for him, death only matters when it happens in slow motion. On the evening of March 14, 2004, Danielle left work at 9:38 p.m. She took the same route, wore the same blue coat, and clutched the same clipboard as always. Across the street, the usual taxi, driven by Michael, did not appear. Instead, a black car with no license plate, tinted windows, and low-beam headlights pulled up in exactly the same spot. Danielle hesitated, checked his cell phone. One message said, "Michael couldn't make it. I'm the replacement. Just confirm." Unknown number. Polite language. She looked around. The street was empty, cold. The car door opened. In the back seat, a folded blanket, a lavender sachet, and a purple handkerchief, just like the one Danielle used to wear on her wrist. A small detail, but enough to trigger a false sense of security. She entered. The man at the wheel didn't turn his face, just said, "It's Danielle, right?" She responded with a nod. He smiled briefly. Minutes later, while passing through an area with no signal, Elliot, the man behind the wheel, pulled out a small metal tube connected to the seat. A handcrafted automatic injection system with a needle hidden under the seat stitching. In less than 40 seconds, the substance penetrated the side of Danielle's thigh. She put her hand to her leg, mumbled something inaudible, and passed out. The car didn't stop. He only reduced his speed before leaving the asphalt and entering a dirt path covered by trees. No sudden braking, no screaming, no fuss. The city continued to sleep, and Danielle too. In Elliot's mind, there was no rush. The approach had worked as expected. Phase 2 of the experiment was underway, and for the first time that case 147 was alive. You said Danielle woke up in the center of the room. White, steady light, cutting through the darkness like a blade. The ambient sound was muffled, echoless. Only her breathing, short, uneven, and the mechanical sound of a timer slowly turning, somewhere out of sight. Her arms were restrained by padded straps secured with surgical rivets. Her legs were immobilized by side braces, similar to those found in old-fashioned dental chairs. There was something under her head, an anatomical support that prevented any rotation of the neck. But the most disturbing thing was the silence. There were no orders, no threats, no questions. Elliot walked in as if he were late for an appointment. Nitrile gloves, clean lab coat, surgical mask over his face. He didn't look at her. He didn't call her by name. He just walked over to the side table and pulled out a laminated notebook. He flipped through it, scribbled something. He turned on a tape recorder. He said, "I'm sorry. Test 0047, beginning of observation, minimal stimulus, conscious response." He then administered an injection into Danielle's left forearm, a translucent, odorless substance developed from veterinary anesthetic compounds. The effect was specific. keeping the body paralyzed, but with active perception. Her eyes dilated, his breathing wavered, the mouth opened, but no sound came out. For 189 minutes, Elliot recorded neurological reactions, changes in heartbeat, pupillary variations, micro-expressions. Sometimes he would come closer and mumble random words. Winter, mirror, speed, as if testing hidden triggers. Danielle cried, but the tears evaporated before they touched the side of her face. The timer stopped at 3:47. Elliot turned off the light, closed the pad and whispered, "She held up well, maybe better than the others." Then he left, leaving the body in the same position. The experiment was complete, but the observation was just beginning. Elliot did not clean up the scene for fear of discovery. He cleaned it up because chaos was unacceptable. Disorder to him was a failure of method. Danielle was dead, but her presence had to remain intact. The body remained on the table for another 4 hours, under artificial refrigeration, while Elliot performed each step of the cleanup like a post-operative surgeon. It started with the hands, washed with antiseptic solution, brushed nails, dried with sterile gas. Then the eyes, still half closed, were moistened with saline solution, as if to keep them shining for longer. The clothes she was wearing were replaced by a blue hospital gown without a logo, neatly folded before being put on. No off-axis bending, no exposed seams. The tools used, syringes, tubes, tapes, scalpels, were separated by type of material, wrapped in surgical cloth and discarded in 3 different routes planned in previous years. Each waste bag had its own tracker, which would be activated and destroyed every 72 hours. The floor was sanitized with hypochlorite, dried with steel blades, and finished with a deodorizer used in morgues with bodies in an advanced state of decomposition. Not out of necessity, but out of obsession. The analog camera, which recorded the entire experiment, was manually rewound, the film removed and sealed with numbered labels. He wrote, "047 completed. Endurance, 189 minutes. But the most unnerving detail was what he purposely left behind. A pocket watch, stopped at 3:47 a.m., hanging by a surgical thread from the ceiling above the stretcher, marking the exact moment Danielle stopped. That scene didn't say crime, it said control. It was as if the place had not been invaded by violence, but in extreme order. Elliot didn't hide what he did, he organized, like someone who sets up a showcase for oblivion. Danielle was not buried. Elliot was never interested in hiding bodies. He archived them, and to do so, he used a space that few knew existed, an underground chamber installed in the old drainage tunnel of a disused mine. Access was gained through a metal opening camouflaged under a broken concrete slab on the edge of the rural land acquired years before. Inside, the temperature was kept constant by a homemade passive ventilation system. The walls were insulated with lead sheets. In the deepest corner of the structure was an industrial metal cabinet, numbered and sealed with military-grade locks. Inside, Danielle was positioned in the fetal position, wrapped in hospital drapes, her limbs secured with surgical tape. But it wasn't a hiding place. It was a document. Beside the body, Elliot left a cassette recorder with a single recording. Danielle herself, quietly reading from a book on conscious anesthesia. He had made her repeat the text during the experiment. Each sentence, spoken with hesitation and trembling, turned the story into a ritual. Above the compartment, on the inner wall of the closet, he wrote, with a scalpel, the same sentence that appeared in his notebook. Patient 0047, documented resistance. On the floor, a single unlit candle, and next to it, a purple scarf, identical to the one Danielle wore on her wrist, but folded into a triangular shape, with her name hand-embroidered in the corner. Nothing was done to prevent it from being found, but everything was done so that if it was, it would appear deliberate. Elliot didn't need a grave. I needed a file that spoke for itself. Something that said, she was here, and it was exactly as I planned. Because for him, disappearance was not the end. It was the cataloguing of a perfectly constructed absence, It was by chance. It always is. A group of young urban explorers, obsessed with abandoned sites and cursed places, decided to record a series of videos in old mines in the interior of Monroe. The first expedition took place on a Sunday afternoon. Equipped with flashlights, cameras, and drones, they followed the rusted tracks to a metal structure half hidden under rubble. The lock appeared to be intact, but it was not locked. When they pushed the door open, the air that came out was thick, still. One of the young people fell ill at the time, but the camera didn't stop recording. The shaky image captured the cabinet at the back of the room, the folded handkerchief, the unlit candle, the old recorder, and something that no one understood at first. A perfectly preserved body, positioned in a fetal posture, like a museum piece. The police were called the same day, and when experts arrived, they found more than human remains. They found structure, intention, and a handwritten note inside a plastic envelope fixed to the ceiling. Case 0047, complete immobility. If you're reading this, it's already too late to understand. But what really triggered the alert was not the body. It was the cassette tape. An audio forensic expert identified the voice of the victim, Danielle Moore, and confirmed that a medical text on sedation was being read continuously. The tape ended with a whispered sentence from a second male voice. She lasted longer than I expected. The discovery went viral on crime forums. Comparisons to other past disappearances began to emerge. Patterns, similarities. But one name resurfaced most strongly: Elliot Graves. His file was never really closed, just forgotten. And in that recording, the silence between the sentences said more than any report. The first clue did not reveal the killer, revealed the method. And that was just the beginning. When the recording was released for forensic examination, an FBI agent had a snap. There was something familiar about the cadence of the men's words at the end of the tape. He compared it to a confession recorded in 2009, in a case dismissed due to lack of evidence. The voice was identical. The name behind it, Elliot Graves. Locating Elliot wasn't difficult. He never hid. He still lived in the same trailer, isolated on a forgotten country road, surrounded by trees that didn't seem to age. The agents arrived at 5:11 a.m. It was raining fine. No sounds other than the detectives breathing and the clink of boots on damp wood. The door was ajar. Inside, Elliot sat facing a blank wall, motionless. A tape recorder was playing a single clip on the tape, Danielle's voice, repeating the same paragraph about conscious anesthesia. He didn't get up. He didn't ask why they were there. He just looked over his shoulder and said, in a low, almost monotonous voice. She spoke better than the others. He did not resist arrest. He walked to the police car as if he were following a forgotten protocol. No remorse, no emotion. During the journey to the police station, he said nothing. He just kept his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror as if he were observing something behind him or inside. In the cell, the guards reported something that no one could explain. The room temperature had suddenly dropped. There was no air leak, no electrical fault, but the thermometer had been 3 degrees C below normal for 11 minutes, exactly how long Elliot had been alone before the first interrogation. When he was called, he stood up, put his hands in his uniform pockets and whispered, "If you heard the tape, then you already know it's not over." In his mind, it wasn't a prison. It was the next phase of the experiment, and now he had an audience. You said, Elliot's interrogation began at 9 a.m. sharp. 2 agents, 1 camera, a room without mirrors. He sat down calmly, adjusted the collar of his uniform and folded his hands on the table. There were no handcuffs. It wasn't necessary. He looked at home. The first question was protocol. "Do you recognize the voice on the tape?" Elliot just smiled, a discreet, almost clinical smile. She read it right, better than the previous one. Over the next 4 hours, he described the cataloging process as if explaining a medical prescription. He talked about conscious immobility, tests of neurological resistance, involuntary failures of the human body in the face of progressive deprivation. But he did not use terms like victim or death. "It's not murder," he said. "It's data extraction, but it can't be repeated. Each person delivers in a different way. That's why they disappear." When they asked about Danielle, he tilted his head. 0047, the most controlled so far. But there was a moment when she almost hung up early. Almost. That's why I left the tape. I needed to review. The silence between the agents was the first sign of discomfort, Elliot noticed. "You thought it was just a body, but I left that case to be found, because he was the first one that worked." Then he mentioned another name, one that was not in the current archives, Annabeth Keller. This one didn't go to the recorder, but she understood better. "It was in 1998. You didn't even connect the dots." The sentence fell across the room like a dry cut. Annabeth was a student who had been missing for 27 years, case filed, no clues, no body. But Elliot described a scar on her leg, the model of her glasses, and even the phrase in the diary found in the house, "Waiting is the longest part of fear." He didn't confess out of guilt. He delivered parts, like whoever wants someone to continue the game. On the last question, why, Elliot only replied, "Because the next one has already started." Until that moment, the narrative that the police were trying to put together was that of a methodical, isolated killer, probably the result of some undiagnosed trauma. But Elliot Graves dismantled this idea with the same coolness with which he assembled his archives. He wasn't a control freak. He didn't kill on impulse. What he did was build a logic, a system. During a second interrogation, without any pressure, he revealed a code notebook, a thick paper notebook which he kept hidden inside a false wall in the trailer. Each page, a name, a number, a time of resistance, a result. They were not victims. They were variables, he said. Elliot called his experiments fragmentation protocols. He believed that the human mind does not fail at the moment of pain, but in the instant before. The focus of the study was to identify the exact second in which a person stops fighting, right before dying. Death doesn't interest me, it's statistics. What matters is the previous silence, the one no one listens to because they're too busy trying to save. Annabeth Keller, who disappeared in 1998, was the prototype 001, Danielle Moore, O-Case 0047. But there were notes that went up to the number 053, which indicated that even after the discovery of Danielle's body, at least 6 more cases had already been carried out, or planned. Each experiment was different. Some involved repetitive sounds, others exposure to uninterrupted light, all recorded. No body was found outside of Danielle's pattern. The reason? Elliot stated that he only left case 047 to be discovered for a specific reason, because she was the only one who almost got through. I needed to know what happens when someone doesn't give up, and you helped me understand. His goal was never to kill and disappear. It was to kill and provoke continuity, a kind of perverse legacy, as if each ribbon was an invitation for whoever came after. Danielle Moore disappeared in 2004. She was found in 2023, but chronology doesn't explain what happened in between, because according to Elliot Graves, she was never really lost, just interrupted. That was the word he used. Controlled interruption, as if the time between the last breath and the end of the tape was just a comma in something bigger. The cell Elliot is in today has been reinforced. Complete isolation, no objects, no books, no tape recorders. But even that is part of the game. Because since the last interrogation session, he hasn't said a single word. He started writing, little notes, riddles, sequences of numbers, maps without labels. The last one left on. The bed said, "You thought there were 53, but I only documented the ones that failed." No direct confession, no regrets. But the investigation team believes that each item in the notebook is a route, a path, a place where the next file might be or has already been accessed. Because the most disturbing thing is this: Elliot never ran. He never covered his tracks. He wanted to be found. And now, he waits. Danielle was just the beginning of the visible part of the experiment. The others? They are. Scattered, hidden between walls, mines, basements. And if the pattern continues, K054 should already be underway. You just don't know where yet. Because the question was never, why did he do that? But yes, why did he want us to know now? If this story has stuck with you so far, comment, "Silence archives better than the earth." Leave a like and subscribe, because in the next episode, we will open a recording hidden for 11 years, where the murderer does not confess with words. He confesses with sounds, and among them, someone still asks for help, but only once and never repeats.